Today, we will talk about SHX, XLM, and XRP because all of them are tied in with the 1% and they all come from the exact same people, which are all tied into PayPal, and we will even talk a bit about Elon. I have found some things, and I have been told some things that connect Stronghold and Stellar into blockchain-based elections. And with the surprising preliminary results at the moment, and with a lot of projections that are equally as surprising, Stronghold has been talking a lot about involvement in voting and elections.
While blockchain can enhance security in some ways, it can also introduce risks in other ways. For example, there's the potential for 51% attacks if a single entity gains majority control of the network. There's also the vulnerability to quantum computing advancements that could break current encryption. And there's the risk that a bug in a smart contract could compromise the entire voting process. A focused effort to establish clear regulatory frameworks and processes to ensure the security of blockchain networks is essential. Implementing blockchain voting would require navigating complex legal landscapes, requiring new legislation with a firm understanding of blockchain-based voting and compliance standards consistent with existing election laws.
In the first half here, I will concentrate on explaining all of the connections that SHX, XLM, and XRP have into politics. And then in the second half, I will explain how Stellar specifically has a lot of tools in order to turn this into a reality. And as I alluded to at the start, there is some involvement with Elon here. And there has been a lot of speculation about how him possibly coming into the US government to create the Department of Government Efficiency just happens to line up with Doge as well, which he has been providing a lot of interesting entertainment on that for a few years now. And Department of Government Efficiency just so happens to spell Doge. The important point here is that there is standards and patents out there right now about elections running on DLT. Here is one from the IEEE who is involved with blockchain technology standards as well, talking about electronic voting on chain. And I do not have access here because I do not pay for it, but they also have a mobile voting system as well, which appears as if it would run on some kind of official app, which could easily tie into DLT. And there is also a USPS patent that talks about DLT voting as well. And it is involving the Department of Homeland Security too. Here is the actual patent if you are interested. And an interesting note is that it talks about a digital trust architecture, which sounds as if it could end up as a good fit for Stellar because of their quote-unquote proof of agreement consensus and how quorums work. And I have been speculating on it for quite a long time now, and in my own opinion, it seems to be becoming more and more true as these entities put out more information. And in my own opinion, I think that Ripple, Stellar, and Stronghold are all kind of working in a tangential joint venture kind of a way, where Ripple has been concentrating on the ILP and institutional custody. Stellar has been concentrating on retail and commercial institution infrastructure, and they also have smart contracts. And Stronghold is kind of a combination of those. However, it also has its own ties into retail institution to institution payments. And the post was taken down, but I believe this was talking about something that Brad Garlinghouse commented on about politics and adoption. And if you look at the political landscape around crypto at the moment, you have each of the two parties expressing a lot of opinions on it. And I think that one has a more economically viable approach. However, I think that the full scale adoption and implementation of DLT happens regardless. It doesn't really matter because the powerful institutions control everything anyway. So if you look at the entities called out here, you've got pretty direct and significant connections into SHX, XLM, and XRP. Bank of America is heavily involved in XRP. IBM has a ton of ties into XLM and SHX. Nacha and Stronghold are tied together at the hip. The US Treasury, I believe, has been exploring tokenization of bonds with XRP and XLM. Can't remember off of the top of my head. There are a lot of XRP ties into the IMF. The Atlantic Council was just talking a ton about Stellar in Ukraine and about how that retail DLT infrastructure is actually operational. The BIS has ties into pretty much everything at this point. Quant has a lot of interconnections with XRP, and it's also heavily involved in Hyperledger and IBM. And I can go on and on here, but the big point is that these three companies, which all tie together and to the exact same powerful people, are heavily connected. And in my opinion, I think they have been chosen in their own rights. So from Tammy Camp, we are beginning to talk about Fairshake here. And that is the hack that SHX, XRP, and even Coinbase, which ties into XRP, XLM, and into BlackRock as well, they have been heavily contributing. So Ripple just gave 50 million, and I believe Stronghold has contributed as well. I want to say 10 million, but I don't remember off the top of my head, and I don't remember where I actually found that. Here we have evidence of Ripple and Stronghold working on the political end of things to ensure pro-crypto candidates end up in office. And as we begin to turn more to how Stellar, which connects heavily into Stronghold, is capable with the tools that they have created and the partnerships that they have established, they are extremely prepared to be able to create the infrastructure to put voting and elections on chain.
Openness and interoperability in web technologies. It's those same policy priorities that drew me to blockchain, an industry that I believe can learn from past mistakes made in other areas of web development. Stellar is an open, permissionless, decentralized network that is optimized for payments. There is no single entity, including SDF, that controls the code base of the network or its growth. You don't need permission to use this technology. Just like the underpinnings of the internet, it is ready and available for use to anyone. The Stellar platform is a pioneer of tokenization, optimized for fiat-backed asset issuance before stablecoin was even a word. Over the last few years, an ecosystem of businesses and users have built use cases around Stellar-based stablecoins due to their incredible utility to solve many of the problems we see in today's payment landscape.
I think that was when he was testifying to Congress about the CFTC being involved in crypto, but I honestly don't remember that either, and it's not all that important here. The important thing is that they are working with the CFTC and institutions such as BlackRock and JPM to position themselves as a favorable DLT infrastructure, which is talked about here in an article on the Stellar site from January of 2023. They have also kind of indirectly become even more tied into the government itself in an extremely applicable way that could relate to DLT voting and elections. In 2020, they announced a partnership with, which is an analytics company. In 2021, the IRS began to work with them to identify unreported income from crypto assets, which I am not supporting here. However, it does show a tangible and important tie into the topic here. And here is the contract itself. Tammy Camp also has a lot of personal ties into the government as well. Her father was a military intelligence type, and she talks about his influence a lot. And I have a hunch that his experience and skills kind of rubbed off on her. And on that note, she was apparently extremely involved with NASA as well. Stronghold has been putting out a lot of content on DLT being able to prevent voter fraud, which kind of explains, or could possibly explain, why we are experiencing the kind of results and projections that we are right now.
The US elections are coming up, so we've decided we're going to entertain a few ways that blockchain could potentially help prevent voter fraud. Blockchain is decentralized digital ledger that records transactions across a network of computers and is designed to be secure, transparent, and resistant to any modifications. Voter fraud, on the other hand, refers to any illegal interference with the voting process, including things like voting multiple times, impersonating other voters, or tampering with vote counts. Now, let's take a look at how blockchain could address some common concerns in voting. Blockchain could create a secure, encrypted voter ID system in which each individual voter would have a unique digital identity that's nearly impossible to fake. Once a vote is cast, it's recorded on the blockchain. This creates an immutable record that can't be altered without detection.
And in my own opinion, I think that pushing DLT voting infrastructure in order to have people embrace digital ID and its adoption might be a way to have the American public a lot more open, which would then get them into the DLT financial infrastructure. And at this point in time, I think that around 85% of the US thinks that voter ID is a problem. So that one topic might be able to not only tie into our topic here, but it could also begin to implement the full-scale adoption of a DLT financial infrastructure too, which has recently been talked about again in September of 2024. Here is a bit more on their involvement in that pack.
Clear regulatory and legal frameworks can accelerate blockchain development and increase adoption, opening more opportunities for blockchain in new markets for a much larger audience. At Stronghold, our mission has always been to build a more inclusive, stable, and connected global economy. Blockchain technology is critical to that mission. That is why we are supporting Fairshake's effort to further blockchain innovation and credibility. Check out our blog to learn more about our support for Fairshake and Hold Strong. Some of you might be asking, is Fairshake Pack good for blockchain? Or why does Stronghold support Fairshake? The answer is simple. We know blockchain innovation needs clear regulatory and legal frameworks if it's going to continue to improve, and we need bipartisan legislation to put those frameworks in place. We need legislation that understands, aligns with, and supports the best practices, interests, and policies to guarantee blockchain's growth and progress. We also know that Fairshake Pack supports the blockchain economy and is working to ensure that the right candidates from both parties are put in the right positions to make the right decisions that can help blockchain reach its full potential here in the United States.
Here, we will get into how Stellar, and therefore even Stronghold, could be involved in DLT voting and elections. If you just take a look at who's involved, Candace has been talking about the retail DLT infrastructure adoption in Ukraine with the Atlantic Council here recently. Benell has testified in front of Congress, and their advisors are particularly interesting. So you've got Sam Altman of OpenAI, which I think that AI could have a huge involvement in this. Keith Rebois, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. He is out of the PayPal Mafia too. And Greg Stein is involved with Apache, which I will touch on here in a bit. As I was checking out how Stellar is positioned with their infrastructure to get involved in voting in elections, I came across a couple of projects of theirs. One is called Hubble. It has increased speed and cut costs by over 90% and offers real-time processing. In this October 2024 article, it is explaining how it works in a technical sense. And in all honesty, that is a topic that I can only understand a little bit on. However, in this July 2023 article, it is talking about Hubble and data analytics, which is exactly what Stellar has gotten involved in as of 2020, which has gotten involved with the US government too. It is hosted on Google BigQuery, which allows anyone to connect over Google Cloud. Hubble stores two types of data, including transactional, which sounds a lot like what would be required to keep track of a large amount of data, such as the amount required to validate votes in an election in an extremely populated country. Because they are tied into Google, it separates storage from compute, and it also allows for cross-chain analytics. The other project I found is called Galaxie, which is all about storing and extracting stellar data. Galaxie is able to efficiently export the entire body of stellar data and store it in a data lake, which creates a foundation of pre-processed information that can be rapidly accessed and transformed by custom applications. And it also ties in Hubble here, which makes sense because if you are creating a large amount of information in a pool as to where you do not have to store all of that on chain, which could require a ton of space, you would probably have to have some way in order to quickly analyze and process that. Galaxie also calls out Google Cloud, just like we talked about with Hubble. So in between these two applications, Stellar essentially has a way to store and process a ton of voter ID and voting information in order to conduct an election on chain. Here is an article on Google Cloud specifically talking about how they have gotten involved with Stellar before and how that involvement has required complicated calculations on hard to access data across large databases. Here is a company called Indicium, not sure how to pronounce it either, but it is concentrating on data products. And in this article here, it also calls out Stellar and its work with Google Cloud. I also came across a Google application called Stellar Cyber Starlight, which is interesting because it could possibly be a callback to Stellar itself, and Stellar has a payments application called Starlight. So I can't find anything that specifically calls out Stellar itself, but I just thought it was an interesting coincidence. And I did say that I would talk about Stellar and Apache. Well, here is an article from 2020 that is also talking about data analytics on Stellar. And it is talking about how Apache Airflow is able to create directed acyclic graphs which are a lot faster compared to a typical blockchain. A common example of that would be the network and consensus that Hedera HBAR has. And it is also interesting because it is talking about Google Cloud and BigQuery, which are once again tying into Hubble and into Galaxie.